In the text, Open Veins of Latin America by Galeano, many themes of European imperialism and conquest are touched on specifically in the Americas in the 1400s. It starts off with discussing how Christopher Columbus decided to travel by ship around the globe trying to find silver, gold, or other exotic lands and riches that he could exploit. He ended up finding what's now known as the U.S. He thought it was Asia. He died thinking it was Asia. He firmly believed that he could take control of this land all for himself. And he was motivated by a desire for gold, spices, and other treasures. He also was motivated by a desire to spread Christianity and force it upon people, and he was backed by the Spanish monarchy. So Columbus and his men encountered many indigenous populations who at first were friendly to him and eventually learned that this would be a regrettable decision because they eventually decimated these native communities with advanced weaponry, diseases that were accidentally spread but were very deadly to the native populations as they had not built up the antibodies to these European diseases, as they were only used to the ones that were in their native communities. So they faced a genocide, forced labor, mass killings, harsh conditions. The way for many Native Americans to escape was either suicide or fleeing. There was no good option for them. There was a near extermination of many indigenous communities. Christopher Columbus was not the only exploiter. Hernan Cortes and Francisco Pizarro, who are two leaders, took vast treasures from the Aztec and Inca empires, which fed into their fueling of the European economies. Many people who went looking for these treasures died in the conquest, not to mention the large populations of Native Americans that were murdered due to this. There were also tales of El Dorado in the New World. Sir Walter Raleigh expeditioned up the Orinoco River to find El Dorado, but his trip did not succeed, and many people were encouraged by this to try to finish his conquest. The discovery of silver in Potosi in 1545 brought tons of wealth to Europe, but it came at a great cost of lives, especially the Native Americans. So the influence of this colonialism and genocide was the shifting of an entire population of Native people. They were forced into a European livelihood, and their lives were never the same. And this relates to Gonzalez's Harvest of Empire, because his paper discussed very similar themes, but in more current times. So the last one was in the 1400s. This one was in the 1900s, I believe, and it discussed very similar themes of colonialism and the higher, more privileged power taking advantage of less powerful countries like the Dominican Republic and Nicaragua. So in 1916, President Woodrow Wilson decided to send U.S. Marines to the Dominican Republic because he was afraid that Germany was going to align with the Dominican Republic. So he wanted to make sure that he had power of the Dominican Republic first. So the U.S. did some things that could be considered good, like creating highways and schools, but overall it was harmful as American sugar companies bought tons of land, which created a lot of poverty because people were kicked out of their jobs, their livelihoods, their land. And the U.S. even set up a national police force, and Rafael Trujillo rose to power as a brutal, violent dictator. In Nicaragua, President Jose Santos Zelaya was conflicting with US businesses because he would not let them have whatever they wanted. He didn't give them special treatment. So the US forced Zelaya out of power, and these new leaders still did not give America what they wanted, so they sent Marines to keep order, and a man named Augusto Caesar Sandino decided to rebel against the US, but he was assassinated, and Anastasio Somoza took control, and he began dictating with power backed from the US. So overall, the broader picture of both of these texts and how they connect is that they are about the more privileged higher power taking control and taking advantage of smaller powers and creating genocides, poverty, political, socioeconomic, and social changes that the people living there originally did not have to deal with.